given by Pavel Galich from Technion University in Israel, and it's devoted to designing phononic crystals based on the symmetry rules. Please, Pavel.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this work was done in collaboration with my actually first graduate student from the Technion Nadezhda and my postdoc mentor, Professor Ned Thomas, who is now in Texas A&M, but at Rice University at that time. So before talking about symmetries and phononic crystals, first I would like to introduce the concept of phononic crystal. So if you're not familiar with it, so the most simple and the primitive example of phononic crystal is a simple layered materials. For example, orange is steel and white is the epoxy, and then if we excite left edge, for example, with the ultrasonic transducer, in this case the waves go through, but if we change the thickness of the layers, for example, or period of our laminates, so for some frequencies the vibrations will not be able to go through. And in this case we say that there is a band gap and this frequency, but basically it means that if we write left side here, for example, on the right side we will not detect anything due to the backscattering. And the beautiful thing about the phononic crystals that they can be, of course, extended to the 2D and 3D. And today I will be talking about the 2D case mostly. So if we solve the ultrasonic range, then we can, by simply changing the lattice size of our structure, we can shift the band gap to different frequencies. So if you are talking the lattice size on the scale of the human beings, the height, then we're talking about the seismic waves, right? So this is the hertz. Now you can hear me on the audible frequencies, and if I make the area of cylinders square or hexagonal, so with the proper period, you will not be able to hear me, even though maybe you'll be able to see me. And this is actually the sculpture, which is the actual sonic or phononic crystal, but that was just originally designed as a piece of art. And this physicist Palermo and his friends, they just passed through, and then they put some microphone, measure it, and realized that this is actually the acoustic crystals, and publish it in scientific reports. And if we go to the higher frequencies, then we can even talk about the thermal isolation. Of course, there will be some problems with fabrication because we are talking about the hundreds of nanometers. And of course, when we have thermal high temperatures, there also everything gets a bit more complicated. But in general, the beauty about the phononic crystals that once you tested them in one of these frequency ranges, you can easily shift them to another scale. And in this talk, I will show you the dispersion curves and band structure. So that's why, just to briefly refresh, how do I get it? So if we're talking about the propagation of the waves, so usually we can use the time-space domain or frequency vector domain. And I will use the frequency vector domain. And then usually in the isotropic homogeneous material, if, for example, aluminum, I don't have dispersion, so I will have two lines. The one with the lowest inclination is the shear wave, and the second one with the highest is the pressure wave. Something that we know from the high school physics, so nothing new. But then if I introduce periodicity to my system, so for example I have two isotropic materials, and then I can show everything just within the it's called the first Brillouin zone, and these things are called Bragg planes. So what I do here, this is the lattice size, and then I reflect from the second part, then I shift from the third, and etc. And in this case, I will be able to see all the allowed states, just all the allowed frequency for all the wave vectors just within this rectangular. So this is a very handy thing. And of course, if my wavelength is very large or the wave number is very small, then I go to the long wave limit, and then definitely I will not feel that I have here some periodicity. So if I approach the lattice, the wavelengths approach the lattice size, then of course there will be dispersion. It's not shown here, but you will see it, for example, on this plot. So here you can see the dispersion if we increase the wave number, and here we also see some gap, also here as well, which means that here the waves of these frequencies or vibrations, they cannot propagate from here in just this horizontal dimension. While of course in isotropic material we will have these two polarizations. And if we have more complex structure, like I will have in this case, in the 2D case, so then we need to scan not just from 0 to p over I in the reciprocal space, but we need to scan this triangle that Slava Slisarenko already showed it to you. For this is just an example for one of the space groups. In general, we have 17, which I mentioned just in a few minutes. And so this comes from the quantum physics. So if we have like these atoms, then we can construct the Brillouin zone, and we can do all the calculations just within this Brillouin zone because it's periodic, and then say that this applies to the whole periodic structure. And the reciprocal space, or it's also called the K-space, is the Fourier transformation of the Bravais lattice group or the real space. And the first Brillouin zone cell is in the reciprocal space. It's like a Winger-Sate cell in the Bravais lattice group, if you know crystallography, so you can have a reference to that. So yeah, that's already said that we just obtain the solution for the Brillouin zone, and then we can make conclusions about the whole structure. And if our structure has more symmetries, then we can even reduce it. For example, from this big square, we reduce only to this small triangle, and this is called irreducible Brillouin zone, and it depends on the symmetry of our pattern or phononic crystal. And irreducible Brillouin zone path choice, it depends on first of all on the dimensions. So if we have 1D case, then it's just a gamma x highly symmetry point 0 and 0, 0, 0 and pi over the lattice size. If it's 2D, then it can look like this one that I will use in this work, and this is also the case, for example, for the square array of cylinders. And for the spheres, for example, it gets even more complicated. But the most important thing that I want to point out, that irreducible Brillouin zone, it's not unique for the 2D and 3D case. And so you first need to define the symmetry group of your structure, and then only you can open the books on crystallography and check which irreducible Brillouin zone you need to take. And I stress this because, unfortunately, in many papers, especially when people enter the field, they just take the most common irreducible Brillouin zone and assume that this will work for their structure. But actually, and in 3D, it gets even more complicated. So, but in crystallography, everything is well known. So you can, once you define the symmetry group of your structure, you can easily find the corresponding irreducible Brillouin zone. And in this talk, I will focus on the so-called P4GM symmetry group, which is kind of unique because it contains the glide operation. So now, for example, if I walk, So then this line will be the glide reflection that I mirror my step, and then I shift it half a period. So if this is the irreducible symmetry aberration, like it denotes dash, and this is the unit cell, then we call this group non-symmetric. And in 2D, we have 4 of such groups out of 17. So like, if I ask you to think about some periodic pattern on the plane, so the number of choices is unlimited. So it's infinite. It depends on your creativity. But actually, we can describe any periodic pattern on the plane with just 17 plane groups. And if irreducible symmetry operator, that is like we needed to reproduce the whole structure just from this yellow triangle. So here, for example, we have mirror. Here we have 2-fold axis of rotation. Here's 4-fold axis of rotation. And this dash, these are the glides. So if it's irreducible, so that's the minimum number of symmetry operation that we need, then it's non-symmetric. And there are only 4 of them are non-symmetric, and they have very interesting feature in the band structure. I will show it to you, so-called band sticking phenomenon. So some of the bands, they simply stick to each other, and then the chances of having the band gap or where the waves cannot propagate is significantly higher. And I stress that this P4GM group, it can look very differently. Here you have just some examples. Slava showed you another one with the Bezier curves, right? So I will show you like this one. So this is the one that we ended up with, and you see it looks very different. And we decided to compare it with the, we call it classic or primitive, but this is just like the simple array of circular voids, and which is like well known also in photonics, but also in phononics. So if we just will have the circular perforations, so we also will have certain band gaps for all the directions. And this structure, like similar structure, was originally introduced by de Koch. This is the PhD student of my postdoc mentor, Ned Thomas. And unfortunately, he did not publish about it, only in his PhD thesis. But it's a very good one if you want to understand more on the symmetries and the band structures. And these specific cells, why do I show them to you? Because we wanted to compare this P4GM non-symmetric phononic crystal with something that everyone kind of familiar with and something well known. So to show the advantages of it. And also we designed them so we could 3D print them, right? So, and also in the paper we provide the recipe. Yeah, the quality probably not that good, but this is the US quarter or 1 euro size. So this is like 3 over 3 centimeters pieces, and the thickness of the edge is just 0.2 millimeters. Then, of course, before 3D printing them, we did the numerical simulations, and first we calculated the band structure of this P4GM and the classic, which it has P4MM symmetry. It's very close, but it's symmetric, and we use for that the Bloch-Floquet, so-called Bloch-Floquet approach. Namely because the structure is periodic, so we apply the Bloch-Floquet periodicity conditions on the boundaries, and so of the primitive cell. So this cell cannot be reduced. This is also important thing. And then we assume that the boundary between the air, this one for example, and here, and the solid is actually solid vacuum, because the contrast in acoustic impedance is like 3 orders of magnitude even for resins. So for the aluminum it's even higher, so that's why we will have here 100% reflection, so we don't need to worry for any solid structure interaction in this case. So if you put it, for example, here fluid, then one needs to take this into account. But with the air, we are good. Yeah, and in COMSOL, we just set the free boundary conditions, so everything is quite simple. Then we also, because as I showed you through the printed sample, so we fabricated 4/4 cells, and we did finite 2D modeling. And so we defined a pre-described displacement, either longitudinal or transverse, on the one side, on the left side, and measured the average displacement on the right side. And then simply by dividing them and taking the logarithm, we were able to calculate the transmission loss. And that I will show you a bit later, due to the experiment, because we had 2 transducers, so we were able to pick signal without it like going back and so like bouncing in between. That's why we also modeled that at this boundary we have no reflection at the right age. And so first, before the experiments, let's look at the band structure. This is the best structure for the best P4GM phononic crystal that we could make. So here we have 124%, which is calculated, just we take the closing frequency, subtract the opening frequencies, divide by the mid frequency, multiply by 100%, and we get this number. And here we have kilohertz, actually hertz, yeah, but here we have K. So if we remove the K, we'll have kilohertz. However, in the percent, if we change the lattice size to the meters, it will stay. So the band gap size in percent is independent of the actual lattice size. And this is for the better that we could do for the classic or P4M phononic crystal. And so for the reference, this is if we don't have any voids, just solid, then obviously we don't have any forbidden frequencies. And I guess it's pretty clear that we significantly outperform this classic phononic crystal. So right, it's almost a double. And also that I mentioned to you here, you see we have like less bands like along XM. So along this direction, we have this so-called band sticking effects. And then to end up with this best like P4GM sample, of course, we did the parametric study before. So first we fixed this square, the local resonator size, and then we reduced the connector width, the thickness of the connectors. And interestingly, that at the beginning, it does not make much difference between this classic phononic crystal and P4GM, but then at some point they diverge significantly, and P4GM definitely beats the classic phononic crystal. And on the second slide, second picture, you can see the mid frequency at the band gap width, again as a function of the connector width, and you can see that you have I mean, the difference is obvious, right? The next thing that we did, we fixed this connector with 0.2 millimeters. This is this thickness is picked due to the fabrication limitation. So this is the best that we could 3D print on the Formlabs 3D printer. So we could not do better. And then we changed the local resonator size. So if we go down, if we make it smaller, this the square that you saw, so then in this case we have it monotonically decreases, right? So no surprises here. This is something that is like well known. However, then we discovered this plateau here where the band gap thickness size, sorry, would not change much. And moreover, if we increase it even more, it will go down, which was kind of unexpected and interesting phenomenon, and we managed to explain it in the paper. So if you have a question about this, I answer it. And here again, you can see mid-frequency with the local resonator size. Then based then based on this parametric study, we decided to do the finite, so like to do numerical transmission loss on the 4/4 cells. And because we claim the complete band gap where neither pressure or shear wave can propagate, and also for any direction, right? So for all the k vectors, so we decided to test gamma m direction and also gamma x direction. And we simply change the phononic crystal, so we cut it differently because it's easier to model. But again, we excite the left edge and measure it the right edge. And as you can see here, for both directions, we have this huge attenuation within the band gap. But this is the numerical simulation, so it's expected, right? If you don't see that, then we would not be, I mean, something is wrong with your simulation, either with the band structure calculation or with the transmission loss. However, for this gamma x direction, we saw this like trough here, like the drops within the band gap, which is kind of like very weird, right? Because here you have, okay, this is something that we can accept. So we have here peak, here as well, so a bit shifted, but for the PNS wave. But what is this, right? It's still pretty high attenuation, like minus 40 dB, but still this is like something kind of weird. So we're still trying to understand what is this. But just before this trip, I delivered the talk in Krakow and AGH University, and they suggest me that it actually can be so-called age modes. And that can lead to this phenomenon. So they observe it in their different structure. So, but we will need to look into it. So this is one of the possible explanation. And it's also here you see we have the boundary which is connected. But here we have this like discontinuity at the boundary. So the age mode like cannot propagate here and can propagate here. So probably, but we will need to verify that. And then eventually, based on this parametric study, we 3D printed this 4/4 cells phononic crystals, both P4GM and P4MM or classic one. And then we designed like very simple experimental setup. So the vibration damping platform, 2 piezoelectric transducers that can generate longitudinal waves, and the V1011 Olympus contact transducer, and for the shear waves, V548 contact transducer. So everything is very simple. We put the gel to measure the to match the acoustic impedance between the piezoelectric and the plastic. And then we excite one transducer, and the second we use to pick up the signal. And so if we divide the transmission over reference voltage, we can calculate the transmission loss. So quite simple setup, but it allows us to measure the actual transmission loss through this 3D printed crystals. And here you can see the transmission loss in the gamma x direction. So the wave propagates this way if we create this array. And we have the solid curves on the both A and B. They are experimental curves. So with the step of the 5 kilohertz starting from 10 kilohertz up to 300 kilohertz. And the dashed, these are experimental curves. So if you will look at the solid red and dashed red curves, so we can say that we have a good agreement, right? So in the experiment we have a bit higher one, probably we have more losses. Actually here we also take into account the isotropic structural loss, and if you have questions, I can comment more on this. But anyway, so you can see the pattern here So, and you can say that it's a pretty good agreement. Also for the black curves, for the so-called primitive phononic crystal, and the same picture we can see also for the S waves or shear waves, which are actually rarely explored experimentally. Or if people look into the shear waves, so they look only into the out-of-plane polarization. Here we look into the in-plane, and in the paper even in the out-of-plane, but that's I just want to limit myself to the in-plane wavemos in this talk. So we have pretty good agreement for the both structures. And another interesting thing that we noticed that like the P4GM phononic crystals, they damp waves like more than the P4MM crystal. So not only the band gap size is bigger, but also the actual attenuation is bigger. And if you notice, it's close to the 1 dB, which is actually like a noise floor of our setup, meaning that these P4GM crystals, they can be handy in the cases where you need completely to eliminate the signal. So like almost kill it. Because if you just want to damp your vibrations, you can probably use like conventional materials and you don't need to 3D print the structure. But if you really want to eliminate the vibration completely, then you can use P4GM phononic crystals, for example. And probably you're wondering about these dot areas here on the plot. So at these dotted areas, we cannot trust the experimental data, and actually they have like significant disagreements here, right? And this because the ultrasonic transducers, so we use 100 kilohertz transducers, and they don't perform well for the P wave at the 200 kilohertz frequency, and for the S waves like 170. And also here at the bottom, here you see you can observe discrepancies, right? How come in experiments the transmission loss is lower than in the numerical simulation? This happens because the ultrasonic transducers, they perform within the certain frequency, and they have the bandwidth frequency at which they excite well, and then there is some points where we have really weak signals, so we basically like excite the close to zero amplitude and then try to pick the close to zero amplitude. So that's why the curves that we get, we cannot trust them. But outside of this region, so we have pretty good agreement. And then, so where do we stand finally, like compared to the literature on the phononic crystals? Because it's well explored field, and everyone is trying to make the band gap size bigger. And actually, we got quite upset when we discovered it right before the submission. This paper by et al. It just was published a few months ago, where they have this insanely huge 147% band gap. So significantly larger than the one that we have. However, they did only the numerical simulation, and they used some optimization methods, and they ended up with this weird unit cell. And then we decided, okay, so we will take the lattice size that we have, 8 millimeters, and then try to see what will be their opening frequencies and also the connector widths. And then the actual structure, they have like super thin connectors, so 0.1 millimeter. So, and we could not make it. So the best that we could do is 0.2. And this another paper like from 2016, it will have even thinner connector widths, and they actually, it's very difficult to replicate their structures because they obtain from optimization, and we literally like looked at the pixels to estimate the thickness, and I could not actually repeat their huge band gap sizes. Because they have this also antennas like very tiny features. But in our case, our structure is very robust mechanically because we have like the recipe in our paper, and anyone can go and 3D print it. And if you have ultrasonic transducers, so you can test it. Another thing that this P4GM bandgap is also opens at a pretty low frequency. That's why we also have this large number here. And so in this matter, we definitely beat this 2016 paper because they have 200 kilohertz, but this performs better. However, like if you try to 3D print this structure, I believe that it will definitely fail. Or even if you made it, then you will have a lot of this fragile connectors. So we published these results, then just got accepted a few weeks ago, and just during the launch I received an email that is finally should be available online like within 24 hours, so you're welcome to read the paper if you are interested. And just to sum up, so I hope I convinced you that the P4GM crystals, phononic crystals enable like unprecedentedly large band gaps up to 124%, but maybe someone will discover even bigger band gaps. And so this is happens according to the Koch during the band sticking phenomena, which happens in non-symmorphic crystals, but not in the classic P4M crystals. And also we looked into the propagation of S waves, and together next to the P waves, which is like rarely done in the literature. So that's all, and I'm also looking for the students because I just established a new lab at the Technion, wave mechanics metamaterials. So if you know someone who's interested in the waves or metamaterials, not only in the phononic crystal, so you're welcome to pass this message. Yeah, thank you.